All right. Well, hello and welcome to our first Design Technology Lunch and Learn. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Donnie Gladfelter. I am the Design Technology Manager here at Timmons Group. It's great to obviously meet everybody that I haven't met already and kind of share a new series with you guys with a Lunch and Learn series. So jumping straight into today's presentation, let's see here. Our agenda is pretty simple. So there's a few housekeeping things that I'd like to go over first. But once we get through that, we're going to jump straight into the software, get our hands dirty, get into the trenches a bit, and share just some of the more AutoCAD focused tips and tricks that I've acquired. So this is kind of a reboot of a presentation that I did this past winter at Autodesk University. So I've tried to civilize it a little bit more than the version that I delivered in Vegas. But otherwise, we're going to focus predominantly on AutoCAD, not so much Civil 3D during today's presentation. So once again, for those of you who may not have met me personally just yet, once again, I'm Donnie Gladfelter. I am both a Timmons alumni and, of course, a new employee. I was part of the Timmons team for about 6 years in the early 2000s, and here I am, I'm back. I've authored 6 books on AutoCAD. I'm also an Autodesk Expert Elite member, which is a group of folks selected by Autodesk. All right, so diving into really the meat of today's presentation. I wanted to start just by talking at a high level about the Timmons Group kind of training program. There's a lot, I have a lot of ideas around this. This is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I'm very, very excited to extend and deliver to really the company at large. So already we've rolled out a few things. There's a few others that I have in the works that will be rolling out soon. One of my big core beliefs about training is that training is only as good as it's reinforced. And so what you're going to start seeing is a training program that's going to have a number of facets. Whereas in the past, perhaps maybe we focused predominantly on classroom training. We're certainly going to have that. We're going to be offering our Civil 3D Essentials class coming up in the next couple of months. But beyond that, and hopefully you've seen these, we have our tech tips, which I'm going to hit on a few of these here today as well. But you can, of course, find all of the tech tips on the intranet. And I should have staged this before I started the presentation. But if we go to the intranet, you will, of course, see the latest tech tip here on the homepage. It seems like it's fallen off of the homepage here, but that's fine. If you come over here to Documents now, we have all of the tech tips published right here as well. So here you can see all of the various tech tips. You can go back and see the past episodes right here. You can also just search for tech tips here. And you should see the latest tech tips. So here's, of course, the latest tech tip, which is focused on a lesser known utility of Civil 3D called the batch save utility. We'll hit on this during today's presentation as well. But if you haven't already, I encourage you to take advantage of this resource as well. Next, we of course have the targeted training, which is kind of what I like to refer to as this style of presentation, kind of focused on something a bit more tactical, a bit more focused. It's not sort of the broad sweeping, learn how to use everything in AutoCAD or Civil 3D, but instead focused on a particular area. And like I said, there's a few other things coming soon. Speaking of training and what is coming soon, so there's 2 things that I'd like to share with you. Hopefully you saw my email that I sent out yesterday. But we're going to be doing another one of this sort of style of presentation once again next week. That one is going to be a match made in coordinates, bringing Revit, Civil 3D, and InfraWorks together at last. This is a topic that I've had many of you reach out to me and ask about. It just so happens to also be a presentation that I've also delivered at Autodesk University. So we'll be doing kind of a cameo appearance of that presentation next week. And again, this is about trying to georeference Revit models and making our Civil 3D data flow more easily into Revit and vice versa. So we'll be hosting that presentation same time next week, except we're going to shift things to Tuesdays instead. So next Tuesday at lunchtime, we'll be delivering that presentation. And we're still kind of ironing out some of the details, but the following Tuesday, and I got my dates incorrect here, so I should have proofed this beforehand, but this is going to be the 28th, not the 21st. But on Tuesday, the 28th, so the following weeks, 2 weeks from now, we are going to launch a design technology user group. And I'm really excited about this. I have invited some folks from Scott Wiley's team to deliver that presentation, or at least kind of the main part of that presentation. And we're going to be kind of taking a look behind the curtain a little bit about landscape architecture and kind of their design process. I know many of us obviously interact with landscape in the projects that we do. And so it would be kind of nice to know that, you know, we send our kind of square designs to landscape and they return them to us as this sort of beautiful design. How does that happen? So we're going to try to answer that question in 2 weeks on the 28th. All right. So that is sort of the introductory bits that I have to kind of kick us off today. With that, just some sort of housekeeping bits about the sort of vehicle that we're using to deliver today's presentation. So we are using the Zoom webinar format, which means everybody is in a listen-only mode. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I don't have any validation of that other than nobody has said they can't hear me. So I'm assuming we're A-okay. However, I do welcome and encourage really your feedback during today's presentation. So on my second monitor here, I have kind of the questions and answers pod. Should have a little questions area in the Zoom interface that you can enter any questions that you might have. So if you do have any during the presentation today, go ahead and enter those in there. I'll try to address those as best I can during the presentation, depending on whatever the question might be. If it's relevant to the topic, I'll try to address it kind of online. There might be some things that we have to table and address offline, but either way, we will take care of you there. And I do have one person in the chat panel saying that you can hear me. So that's awesome. All right. So enough of the sort of talking head piece. Let's get into really the meat and potatoes of the presentation today. So in terms of learning objectives, these are pretty broad because really it's about finding ways maybe that you hadn't explored before to better leverage AutoCAD in some capacity. Now, with that said, I always like to put the disclaimer out there for tips and tricks webinars that my expectation is if you are an AutoCAD user, you probably know at least some of the tips that I'm going to share with you today, but maybe you don't know all of them. So hopefully there's at least one or two things that you can take back to your desk after today's presentation and put to work. And of course, if you have ideas above and beyond what I share, I'm curious and eager to learn from all of you guys as well. All right, so let's jump on over to AutoCAD. Let me... Here we go. There we go. And let me maximize this. And let me get my notes up on my other screen here. Okay, so let's do this. All right. So I'm going to start just with some basic user interface stuff. We all like to kind of personalize and make the user interface our own, and that's awesome. A few annoyances that I have. One of the first, especially being on the civil side, is that the default user interface no longer has our coordinate readout. Now, this was one of the tech tips early on, but just a very quick and easy tip here. If you click on this little hamburger icon, as they call it, it's down here in the bottom right corner, right there. If you click on that little hamburger icon, you'll have all of the various things that we can add to the status bar displayed to you. And there's a couple others that I'm going to share with you here too. But the first one here is just to add the coordinates. That will give me my coordinate readout down here at the bottom. So if you haven't discovered that one, that is a really helpful tip. Now, as I mouse around in the software, what you see down here will be the coordinate readout for your project there. So that is a super helpful, I think, incredibly required one, especially in the world of civil engineering drawings. All right, so let's take a look at a few others here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick on the sample surface that's in this particular drawing. And you're probably accustomed to using the full properties palette over here. I typically dock it on the right-hand side of the screen. You might choose to put it on a whole nother screen entirely. Totally up to you. But I know as AutoCAD users, we are very, very greedy when it comes to our screen real estate, and that's totally fine. Now, something else that we have available to us is the quick properties. So here we have quick properties. I have it turned off right now. This is another one of those things that if you don't see it in the status bar at the bottom of your screen, you can pick on that little hamburger icon, which as an aside, I don't know why people call it a hamburger icon. I see more of a stack of pancakes. I don't know who's team pancake, who's team hamburger. Anyway, I guess it depends if you're a breakfast or lunch guy. But this is a lunch and learn, so maybe it's better calling it a hamburger icon. Nonetheless, if you pick on this here, you'll have, once again, all of the various sort of drafting aids that we can put here. One of them is going to be quick properties right here, so you can turn that on. Now, if you're anything like me, you've probably shied away from using quick properties because it never seems to have the properties that I want. So it becomes more of a hindrance than something that actually helps me. But if I turn this on, let me deselect things here, and I'm going to go ahead and pick on this surface, and I, of course, get the quick properties. Now, I kind of get the essential stuff here, what style it is, what is the name of this surface. Those are probably the two most common things that I work with when it comes to properties, for surfaces at least. However, as we can see by looking at the full properties palette over here, there's a whole sort of other pieces and bits and pieces that I don't see in quick properties. One of them, as I'm trying to sort of troubleshoot projects sometimes that I like to do, is take a look at the number of points. So this sort of data here about the number of points, what the minimum maximum elevation is. For instance, at least in Richmond, I know for some of our teams that are closer to the coast, negative elevations might not be an uncommon thing, but at least up here in Richmond, they are. I like also this minimum elevation just as a troubleshooting guide to make sure that my surface doesn't have any sort of bad shots in it. So with that, we can customize very easily what properties are shown right here. The easiest way to do this is to just pick on whatever property or whatever object it is that you want to modify. And you'll notice right here, there's a little CUI button. CUI for the uninitiated is, or it stands for Customize User Interface. There's a bunch of things that we can do there, really just to kind of customize the look and feel of AutoCAD. But if I pick on this, it is going to open up the CUI editor. Now, out of the gate, this looks a bit intimidating. I totally get it. It takes a little bit of learning and kind of acclimating yourself with this to make it useful for you. But nonetheless, all of those properties that I saw, and let me just pull this down a little bit here. Let me see if it'll let me resize it. Here we go. So all of the properties that I saw over here in the full properties bar are also available to me right here as well. So in my case, I liked all of that data information. I found it useful, so I can just go ahead and check those on. I'll say okay. It's going to go ahead and commit those changes. And now when I pick on my surface, the quick properties that it's going to display will include those additional properties. So I can see the number of points. I can validate and verify here that I don't have any bad shots in the surface at elevation 0 or something along those lines. And again, you can customize anything that this shows. So I think that's super helpful. All right. So kind of continue down this path of the user interface for a bit. The next kind of drafting aid that I find incredibly helpful is something known as selection cycling. Now, this was a new feature several years ago. Autodesk made a big sort of splash about it, and then they took it out of the default status bar. I don't get the logic, but nonetheless, it's not here by default. But in our civil engineering drawings, where we all know that a civil engineering drawing is not complete unless it has 987 layers inside of it and an equal number of things drawn on top of each other. With that, if you're trying to kind of make sense of all of that chaos, selection cycling will be your friend. So this is another one of those drafting aids that we can either enable or disable, and we can also choose to display or hide it in the status bar. But right here we have selection cycling. I'm going to go ahead and turn this guy on, and you'll see down here in the status bar, I have a new icon right here. That little green icon right there, that's the selection cycling icon. If we go ahead and toggle that guy on, let's see what that does. So Murphy's Law says as you try to select something in AutoCAD, it will select the object that you don't care about. And what you'll notice here is when I hover over things inside of AutoCAD, there's a little glyph now that's going to pop up there by my cursor. So if you take a look at that little glyph right there, whenever you see that, when you have selection cycling turned on, that means that AutoCAD is a little confused about what it is that you want to actually select. So we can leverage this to our advantage. So when I pick on this now, what I'll get when I have selection cycling turned on, so this guy right here in the status bar, I will get this little menu, and it will let me cycle through all of the stuff that AutoCAD thought I may have wanted to select in the first place. So again, maybe I wanted the the edge of pavement line, which I happen to know in this drawing is red. We can go ahead and pick that right here. And just like that, we have that object selected. So again, in civil drawings, I find selection cycling a incredibly helpful tool. All right. So I'm going to bounce around in drawings here just for a minute. And I'm not sure how folks typically address this, but there's sort of the great debate among AutoCAD sort of users as to what do we set our LT scale at. And this seems to be one of the really hotly debated topics of, do you set LT scale to the model scale? What do you set PSLT scale? So just a quick bit about line type scale, or LT scale as we abbreviate it in AutoCAD. There are actually 4 LT scale variables inside of AutoCAD. So the first and foremost that everyone knows is just regular LT scale. So if you type in LT scale, that's going to be your entire drawing line type scale. So it'll affect every line in the drawing. Above and beyond that, we have 2 variables that complement that. One called MSLT scale for model space line type scale, and the second one called PSLT scale for paper space line type scale. The 4th line type scale entity is called CELT scale, so current entity. Basically, it's going to set a default for any object that you draw in the drawing. So not that you should ever overwrite the line type scale over here, but if you did, you could use that CELT scale to do that. Nonetheless, in this drawing, let me share with you my LT scale sort of setup here. So in this case, the LT scale right now, this is an architectural drawing, so the scales are a little different from what we're accustomed to, but it's set to 96, which in architectural world equals a 1/8 scale drawing. Now, this is fine. Everything looks great here in plan view or in model space, but as soon as I switch over to paper space, things start falling apart a little bit here. So you'll notice here with these dashed areas here, I have these offices that are dashed and these offices that are dashed. Well, these are far more dashing, pardon the pun, or excuse the pun, whichever, than these are. Generally speaking, I'd like all of my dashes to be the same length. So how can we do this? Well, the secret here is just to use LT scale. Instead of setting this to the, instead of setting this to the drawing scale, so in our drawings, a 50 scale drawing would be 50, a 30 scale, we would just set this to, I forget if I said 20 or 30, but you would set it to the 1 inch equals to X number of feet. That X number of feet is what you would typically set LT scale to. What I'm going to do here instead, though, is just set this to 1. Now, that makes things worse. So we have another variable here called PSLT scale, or sorry, yes, PSLT scale. And so I'm going to go ahead and change that from 0 to 1 as well. Now, if I do a quick regen, you'll notice that all of my LT scales are that these lines should now be the same, and for some reason they're not. So let's see what's happening here. That looks correct. And that is troubling. So my annotation scale is off here. Anyway, the beauty of live presentations. Anyway, so PSLT scale, assuming that your annotation scale is the proper bit here, and for some reason AutoCAD is not letting me change that here. So if I look at the viewport, you'll see that we have a standard scale and an annotation scale. Oh, I need to unlock my viewport. That's why. Let me unlock the viewport. Let me set this to a 1/8 scale. There we go. So we'll set the annotation scale and the actual viewport scale to 1/8. And let's just verify this one is the same. So now you'll notice that both viewports are exactly the same. Now that's good. So we've kind of solved one problem, but we've also now created yet another problem, because when we come back here to model space, where I'm typically spending most of my time, this line now appears continuous right here. So how do we fix that? So this is the third variable that fewer people know about. Most people know about LT scale and PSLT scale, but the third variable that is helpful here is MSLT scale right here. If we set this to 1, what it's going to do is take a look at whatever I have set here as my annotation scale, and it's going to use that. So let's just do a quick regen here, and you'll see that those lines are now dashed as well. So everything should match. So again, long story short here, when it comes to line type scale, you can put things on autopilot by setting 3 variables to 1. The first being LT scale, the second being PSLT scale for paper space, and the third one being MSLT scale for model space. Set all 3 of those to 1, and line type scale will more or less be on autopilot. So while I'm in this drawing as well, it's not uncommon for us to kind of take one drawing and kind of use it as a template. We'll copy it and modify it to look at maybe another area of my drawing, whatever the case might be there. So typically we would right click down here on the layout tab, and we would come in here and I'm looking for the manage here and I don't see it. Anyway, that doesn't matter, because what I'm going to show you is an easier way here. If you press and hold your control key and then you left click on that layout tab, you can just take it and copy it just like that. So now I have 2 layout tabs. If you need to make multiple copies, you can select multiples by pressing and holding the shift key, and that will highlight all 3 right there. And now if I press and hold the control key, you can just drag and drop this over and it will make copies of all 3 of those layout tabs right there. So again, I find that a bit easier to do. As a bonus, that also works inside of Excel with worksheets. So same thing with the tabs at the bottom. You can use the control key to left click and copy a spreadsheet. So helpful bit there. All right, let's get back to our regular plan here and take a dive into things here. So let's take a look at a few annotation bits here inside of AutoCAD. So the first one I want to take a look at is dimensions. So here, if I zoom in, I have just a lone dimension that I have so conveniently planted in this drawing. And right now it says 25 feet. Now, I'm a little suspect about this because if I come over here and I use my distance command, and I'll just do the regular distance here, and I do a quick distance, like so, I get a much different dimension here. You'll see here at the bottom of my screen, it says 26 feet. So if I try that again, and measure things now, you'll see that right there, it says 26 feet. Well, my dimension here says 25 feet. What is going on with this? Well, if we take a look at the properties here, we can see exactly what's going on with it because we can take a look at the text override right here. So right here, we have our text override, and you can see that I have, or somebody has entered in a value of 25 here. Probably not the best thing to do. Hopefully this doesn't happen to you, but we all know that it does. So you could fix this by coming in here to the text override and typing in greater than and then less than brackets there. So the little kind of Pac-Man brackets, kind of, or Baby Shark brackets, depending if you have kids or not, and hit enter, and it would reset things. So you could do that manually, but who has time for doing things manually like that? So there is a command called dim reassoc, not to be confused with the dim reassociate command. So dim reassociate is on the annotate tab. The dim reassoc command is actually an express tool. So these express tools, they were introduced back in release 14, I think, back in 96, 97, and they are still a crowd favorite. Nonetheless, on this express tool panel, we have a dimension panel right here. And one of the super helpful commands for when you get troublesome drawings like this is this dim reassoc command, or reset text, as it is listed in the ribbon for us. If we pick on this guy, getting this to actually read the real dimension is as easy as just picking on it right here. Hit enter, and it is going to show me the real dimension, not this sort of overridden dimension that I have here. All right, so that's my first dimension tip for you. My other one is oftentimes we need to put things like typical or relative, or we want a measurement above and some sort of note below. And if I come in here and I double click on this dimension, we can of course do that. I can just hit enter right here, and I might type in something like TYP for typical. All fine and good. We'll go ahead and say close text editor. And while I did get the note that I wanted into the drawing, the trouble is I really wanted the measurement to be above this dimension line and then this note to be below it. But instead, AutoCAD put everything on top of the dimension line. What's up with that? Well, a lesser known little trick here is that we can get dimensions to sort of straddle the top and bottom of that dimension line by taking a look at the text override. So let me try to zoom in here a little bit. So if you take a look at the properties here under text override, you'll see that we have those sort of Baby Shark bits there, or Pac-Man, depending on what generation you're from. And that, of course, reads out the actual dimension for me. So that's all fine and good. But since I hit enter to create a new line in this dimension, it put a /p. And then I have my note TYP. Well, if I wanted the note to be below the dimension line, change that P to an X right here. So if I do the greater than less than brackets / and I change the P to an X, we'll go ahead and hit enter, and you'll see that the dimension is now above and below the dimension line, which can be super, super helpful in that regard. All right. So let's continue on here with a few other annotation bits that can help us out here. I'm actually going to switch over to another just sort of sample drawing here. And something that we oftentimes need to do is change things that are block attributes. So here I have, this happens to be an architectural drawing, but it could be anything. And this is just a regular block reference. It has an attribute inside of it. And typically the way I would go about modifying this block attribute is to double click on it. And that of course brings up the Batman command, or the enhanced attribute editor officially. And it allows me to modify any and all of the attributes associated with this particular block. And this is all fine and good, but what if I just wanted to just really quickly and easily change just this one piece of text here? Well, the secret that we want to do here is press and hold the control key. And when you do that, if you double click on the block attribute, it will allow you to modify just that block attribute. So you kind of suppress the enhanced block attribute manager, and instead you can just sort of modify this like regular text. So again, press and hold the control key, and then double click on the text that you want to change, and you can change that to whatever you want. Go ahead and type things in right there. This wasn't part of the original schedule, but since it happens to be an issue in this drawing, we'll go ahead and take a look at it. Here I have a block attribute that has kind of gone wild here. So for some reason, the text or the attribute itself has kind of supersized itself, and the block itself is down here. What's going on here? This is actually a pretty simple fix, but one that can puzzle you otherwise. And so this is where we can use the, should be the dim update. Sorry. This is where, and I know the command. Actually, let me try to do the dim reassociate. I think that's actually a command. Oh, at sync, sorry. ATT sync is the command for this. I'll hit select and then pick on this. We'll sync it, yes, and it is back to normal. So ATT sync is the command for that. I was drawing a blank myself, and I'm not sure exactly where that is in the ribbon here, which actually brings me to another piece that I can demonstrate since I've kind of gone off the script here a little bit. If we come in here to the help file, and you're trying to figure out where is a command in the ribbon. Well, if we go into the help file here, you'll of course get the help documentation about that particular tool. But since I wasn't able to find it here for whatever reason, you'll notice that in the help file, there is a find button. So if you're trying to find something in the ribbon, you can hit find, and what this will do is it will switch over, and there we go. So it will switch over to the appropriate tab for you. So I was looking on the annotate tab. I needed to be on the insert tab. And then under block, that expanded block panel is where the @sync command is. And then it gives you a little arrow that bounces up and down, telling you exactly where it is. So again, if you can't find things in the ribbon, search for it in the help file, click that find button, and you will easily find it like so. Continuing on about sort of block attributes here. So as an example, if I were to come in here and explode this block right here, I'm going to come over here and say explode. And we're going to go ahead and pick on this guy right here. And when I explode a block with attributes, I get all of the attributes. This is probably nothing anywhere close to what I was expecting to get when I hit explode. So I'll go ahead and use everyone's favorite command inside of AutoCAD, undo, to undo that. Let's try that again. There we go. So let's undo that, get it back to being a regular block here. So another helpful tip here, not that you typically want to explode block attributes, but I know on occasion it is something that we need to do. This is another one where I will turn to the Express tools to help me out a bit. So here under Express tools, we have a blocks panel right here. And the very first tool on this is explode attributes to text. The command for this, if you want to type it, is burst. So if I go ahead and pick on that, I can now pick on this block. I'll hit enter, and it will not do what it was supposed to do. Let's try that on a different one here. It was supposed to just give me what I see in the drawing, and that is curious. Well, it did show the value instead of giving me the block attribute tags. So when you run the regular explode command, it gives me just the tags, not the value, versus when I did use the burst, it gave me the values, but it typically only shows the attributes that were displayed by default, not the invisible ones. For whatever reason, AutoCAD is not doing what it's supposed to do in this regard, but that's okay. All right, so let's continue on here and take a look at a few other bits here. So collaborating with external stakeholders. We have a number of ways to do this. Let me actually pick back over here, switch back over here to this plan. So when it comes to soliciting input or feedback about a design, we have a lot of different options. We can, of course, PDF that document. We can send them the whole drawing file. A lesser known bit that can be helpful for just sort of those just from the hip kind of collaboration pieces is something called shared views. So this is a relatively new AutoCAD feature, but if we come over here to the Collaborate tab, under shared views, or under it, we have share, and we have a shared views command. Let me hit refresh here. So the way I create a shared view is I just open up whatever drawing it is that I want to share and solicit feedback from someone else about. And from there, creating a shared view is really just as easy as picking new shared view right here. And if I pick on this, it will allow me to create a new shared view. I'll just go ahead and hit 2. And we have some options here. We can do just the current view with all of the layout tabs or layout views. And we can control kind of what is seen here. And with that, I'll just hit share. And what AutoCAD is going to do is in the background, it's going to kind of send this up to the cloud and begin processing it. It won't take too long. It takes a little bit longer than I want for a live presentation. So once it's done, you'll see something like this right here. And what I can do is copy that link and email it to whomever I need to show or share this with. But I can even myself say view in a browser, and this will open up my web browser and take me to the Autodesk viewer. And okay, so that did not show as intended. So it says the new one is done. Let's see if this one did any better. Okay, so both of those failed, which is awesome. But nonetheless, you can share the shared views and it will typically show the floor plan. Let's see if I try this drawing here and share it, if it does any better. I'm not sure. I'll let that run. And it's a really handy bit because it will essentially give the person access to view your AutoCAD file, but they can't download it. They can't do anything with it other than view the file. So that could be a really helpful piece here when, of course, it works. But again, sometimes live presentations, so it's publishing that down here. We'll let that run, but nonetheless, continuing on, let me get back here to my regular kind of project here. So here is a really, really simple kind of civil drawing that I've got here. And let me just go ahead and set this to a style that will show me some contours. So I'll do 1 to 5 background like so. Okay, so that shared view finished. Okay, so apparently the shared view is not working at all today, but anyway, we'll carry on. So when sharing drawings out, let's see. Sorry, I see some bits in the chat here. You're not allowed to access. Okay, so yeah, the command that the shared view command is right here under collaborate, share, shared views. The way these work is they are available for 30 days. So they do just kind of die off after 30 days. You can renew them as much as you need, but again, it can be a really helpful piece for just sharing a drawing. Especially helpful just internally, you need to share a drawing with somebody to get their feedback on something. So, and regarding getting it set up, you do have to have an Autodesk account, and yeah, we can work that out if you would like to use that feature. All right. So talking about collaboration and sharing, as most of us know, with Civil 3D drawings, they are their own animal. If I'm sharing with somebody who isn't using Civil 3D, I probably don't want to send them the actual Civil 3D drawing. I probably want to dumb things down a little bit. And in order to do that, we have a couple of options. So to do that, what I'm going to do here, the first that I have is just come up here to the application menu, the big A in the upper left-hand corner. And under export, we have the option here to export Civil 3D drawing. This is probably the easiest way, but we can come in here to export the Civil 3D drawing. And we have the option here to export to AutoCAD, or technically we can export to MicroStation, but I'm sure our MicroStation users would tell you that if you need something to be in a DGN format, contact the folks in transportation and they can help you open it up in MicroStation and save it that way. Doesn't do as good there. But anyway, for just saving it down to a vanilla, just base AutoCAD drawing, we can export to DWG right here. We can choose kind of what is exported. We have some basic options as well for how to export things. So what file version, this is the regular AutoCAD file version that I want to export things to. So we can choose that. We can choose what happens to feature lines. Do they become 3D polylines or just 2D entities? So we have some control here over what happens. And I can just go ahead and hit export, and it will take, again, whatever is shown in the current view, and in essence, run and explode on all of your Civil 3D objects. It's also why it creates a new file. And we'll let that run here real quick. And it's almost done here, and I can open this up in just a moment. I shouldn't have included sheets. I think it's exporting the individual sheets as well. Anyway, once we let that run, I will open up the base model drawing here. There we go. We'll say OK. And let Civil 3D catch up here. There we go. So I'm going to close out of this. So this is the file that it created. And you'll notice now when I pick on things, it comes across as just regular polylines and AutoCAD objects. So this is kind of the best way to share things out with folks who might need this document otherwise. The other way that we have, which can be a little bit easier and better, perhaps, if you've got a bunch of drawings, maybe an entire project that you need to share with somebody, is going to be the regular eTransmit command. So under export here, we should have eTransmit here as well. Well, I'm just going to type in eTransmit. So if I type in eTransmit, this is going to open up a dialog. And the benefit here over the export to AutoCAD is this will keep the XREFs intact if you would like. So here's the eTransmit command. This is going to pull up everything that is needed to show this file exactly as it is shown in my view. Now, once again, by default, if you use the eTransmit command, it's just going to take the file. It's going to kind of zip up all of the resources, but it's not going to dumb it down just to a vanilla AutoCAD drawing. If we want to dumb it down to a vanilla AutoCAD drawing, we can come here to Transmittal Setups. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one here. Oops. I'll just call this maybe ACAD zip as an example. And what I can do here is choose how I want to transmit these. I'll do a zip file. And for file format, the default is to keep the existing drawing file format. But if you expand this out, and this is the part that a lot of folks don't realize eTransmit can do, is we can do the target format. So 2019 or 2018, 19, 20, and 21 that just came out today, by the way, all use the 2018 file format. So we can say AutoCAD 2018 drawing format with exploded AEC objects. So this is the same thing basically as running the export to AutoCAD. We can do that and hit OK. And this is going to create a zip file of all of the stuff needed to show this drawing exactly as I see it on screen here. So I'll say OK. And it's going to prompt me for a place to save this. We'll just go ahead and save this in this directory. And here you'll notice that it's actually pulling up 31 total files so that this drawing can be shown exactly as it is shown in regular or in our version of AutoCAD here. So if I take a look at that in Explorer here, you'll see that here is the zip file that it created. And here it has everything that is needed. So there are some textures here for three-dimensional stuff to see. So that is all right there. All right, so let's continue on here with some collaboration bits here as well. So while I'm in this drawing, this is actually a little bit of a sneak peek into some of the stuff that we'll talk about next week, which is how to coordinate Revit and Civil 3D together. So here you'll notice I have just a basic building footprint here, but there's really nothing special to it. So yes, it happens to be at elevation, but there's no building here. What if I wanted to actually see the Revit model inside of AutoCAD? Well, Revit does have the ability to export to a drawing DWG file format, even a 3D DWG file format. But if you take an entire building as a three-dimensional drawing, you're probably going to make AutoCAD explode on you. So what can we do instead? Well, a lesser known feature of the XREF command, or external reference command, if I come in here to attach, is the ability now, we typically keep this set to DWG files because we're typically attaching AutoCAD DWG files right here. So this is typically set to DWG. However, we also have Navisworks files. So here as an example, I have the Revit model for this site that I have exported out from Revit as a Navisworks file. So once you do all the drawing coordination stuff that we'll talk about next week, the architect can provide you with this NWC file, or you can create it yourself. And I'll go ahead and hit open. And this is going to come in just like a regular XREF. So we're going to tell it the insertion point of 000 on screen because I've geo-referenced this. Just take the default, say OK. And just like that, we are going to get the Revit model to display inside of this drawing. And if I begin orbiting inside of this drawing, you'll see that it is showing the entire Revit model, and it's not really slowing down on me. I'm getting a little dizzy because I'm going upside down, but otherwise it is not really bogging down the drawing in any way because that Navisworks format is a very kind of efficient, lightweight format. So that can be a really helpful way of navigating things in that regard. The next bit that I want to show here is, and just as I say that, AutoCAD starts freezing on me. Actually, let me switch this back to 2D, or just regular wireframe. That should help out a little bit. There we go. Just regular wireframe. All right. So the other bit that we have here, and eek, it does not like me. All right. So let's continue on here. Let me come back over here to this drawing file here. Actually, sorry, since I'm still over here, I'm going to continue using this drawing file here. So this was another one of those tech tips that I shared with you that we can use, or we can get creative with something known as AutoCAD fields to calculate things like number of parking stalls. So I know when I was in production, this was one of the tasks that I hated the most. And so how can we make this a little less tedious? So here I have a run of parking stalls. I'd like to count the number of them in this particular drawing. To begin with this, I'm going to start with the calculator. So I'll bring up the calculator here, and this is just under the palettes panel on the home ribbon tab. And what I like about the calculator that's actually built into AutoCAD is that it has a distance command right here. So if you ever need to perform a measurement based on a distance that you measure in the drawing, well, we can go ahead and do that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1 divided by, and then I'm going to use this distance command here to snap between 2 of my parking lines here. So in this case, I have 8.5 foot wide stalls. I am going to get a value right here, this 0.117. I'm just going to select it and copy it to my clipboard real quick. So that's it. We're done with that. Next, in order to begin actually calculating the number of parking stalls I have here, I'm going to come in here to this block attribute. So I'm going to double click on this. This is going to bring up that block attribute manager. And here for value, I would typically count the stalls manually, but what I could do instead is right click and you get the option to insert a field. So let's try that here. So when we insert fields, fields basically allow me to read or query things about my drawing and display them as a string of text inside of a drawing. So what can be really helpful here is one of the categories that we have for fields is objects, meaning that we can take any of the properties of an object and display that as a piece of text in the drawing. So here I'm going to do objects. I'm going to choose object. And since there's a bunch of AutoCAD objects, what we can do here is select object right here. So what I've done to make things somewhat simple is I have a big bold polyline right here. I'm going to go ahead and pick on that guy. That just runs along the length of my parking stalls. Where am I going here? Well, let's come over here to length. And again, this is going to be the total length of curb in this case, which is helpful in some regard, but this 222 is definitely not the number of parking stalls that I have. So what I'm going to do is just to make things simple so I don't get partial stalls, I'm going to round this to 0. So now this is 223. I'm getting even worse. What I can do is come down here to additional format. And this is kind of the secret sauce here, that when you click on additional format, what we have here is the option of a conversion factor. If I paste in that value that I just calculated by measuring the parking width, so 1 divided by the parking width, I paste that in here, notice that I get a value not of 222 stalls, but instead 26. So I can go ahead and say okay, and okay, and okay. And now I have that parking stall here. What's really helpful about this is I can just copy this. If I copy both the line and the block attribute, let me just copy that up here. I can just grip edit this now and snap that into place like so to calculate additional runs of parking stalls, just like that. So now if I type in regen, it's going to give me a total of 11 parking stalls. So let's take this a step further here. And if I come over here to annotate, I'm going to come in here into the table panel. And we have this guy right here, which is extract data. So this is the eat text command that if you have it discovered is a wonderfully powerful one. So I'm going to create a new data extraction table. I'm going to call this parking. I'm going to hit next. What this is going to do is scan the entire drawing for stuff that we can extract data from. So there's a bunch of stuff here. Now, what I'm really interested in is just blocks. And really, I'm only interested in this count tag, what I'm using for my parking stalls. So I'm going to filter things down just to that block attribute. So we're going to hit next here. And what I'm really interested in here is just the block attribute of count. So I'm going to find that. This is counterintuitive. I'm going to pick on the object that I want, and I'm going to deselect it, because if you right click, you can choose Invert Selection. So that's going to pick just that. So what this does now is it goes through the drawing and it finds all of the block attributes and their values. So this is being dynamically read based on the width of the stall right here. And we can create a table out of this. Now, what can be really helpful about this, though, is we can take this a bit further. And if you right click here, we can actually add a count column or a totals column. So let's see here. It is not showing me the number because I don't think it's actually considered a number just yet. So let's take this. I'm going to do this times 1, and that should validate it. There we go. So that will, so what I did there is I right clicked and I said insert a formula column. And the formula that I did here was just the count, so the block attribute, times 1, so it doesn't actually do anything, and made it a number instead of a piece of text here. With this being a number now, what I can do is right click on that column header, and there's the option here of totals footer. We can then choose sum, and just like that, it's going to give me a sum of 37. So I'm going to insert this into my drawing, like so, and hit finish, and it's going to come in as a postage stamp, but that's okay. You can see here that it has counted all of those parking stalls. What's really awesome about this is, let's imagine here that the parking count changes. I'm going to go ahead and pick on this and take off a stall. So if I do that and I hit regen, it's going to update this to show 10. And if I come over here to my table, hasn't updated this just yet, but if you refresh this column here real quick, it will update that to 10 and update your total parking count just like that. So block attribute tables or data extraction tables are a wonderfully helpful thing for especially things like quantities when we are working with just vanilla AutoCAD objects. All right, so I am at the end of my time here, which is great. I have seen a few bits come in here, and I think I've answered most of the bits here, but if you do have any questions, please go ahead and enter those into the questions pod. I'll hang out for a few additional moments, but we are recording, or we did record this presentation, so you can always come back and reference it at a later date. Likewise, at the very end of this presentation, a survey should appear on your screen. If I configured the Zoom meeting correctly, I do ask that you provide us feedback on that. Let us know how we did. If you have any additional ideas for future sessions and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I do want to thank you for playing along, joining in. I hope, like I said at the very beginning of this presentation, while I'm sure there were some things that I've shared with you today that you already knew, I hope that you at least take away 1 or 2 new things that you didn't know before. Of course, keep your eye out for other design technology updates, various tech tips. I'll be expanding upon some of the tips that I didn't have a chance to actually demonstrate today. We'll certainly be distributing those out as tech tips. So keep an eye out for those as well. So I just saw here a question came in about, can we have data extraction tables set up for storm sewers to summarize the total feet of pipe for each size and the number of structures? So the direct answer to that question is, since that's a Civil 3D object, the answer is no, unfortunately, on that regard. However, there is some good news there. We can configure a feature inside of Civil 3D called Quantity Takeoff, or QTO, that takes a little bit of setup, but we can use some Civil 3D commands actually to do that. So I'll kind of put that down as a tech tip as well, to share how to do that as well. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. As always, feel free to shoot me an email, send me a Skype or Teams message, and I look forward to our next coming together again next week for another Lunch and Learn. Take care, everyone.